I were to ask you, are you a leader? Okay, okay. Some of you jumped right up, put your hand up there. Some of you were what I call a reluctant leader. You were like this, right? And then some of you didn't raise your hand at all. Okay, so what I want to do is talk with you a little bit about leadership. And so this is a picture of me when I was 6 months old, and I share the picture with you because I wanted to say to you that as the daughter of Mexican immigrant parents born in the United States, in poverty, I was the last example of a leader that you might have imagined. And so my beginnings in this, and I should say to you, I'm at Soka University and I'm the Dean for the Faculty of International Liberal Arts. My first introduction to leadership was one of reluctance. If someone had asked me, Maria, are you a leader? I would not have endorsed that statement. I felt as though I was standing shoulder to shoulder with all of my colleagues, and they said, will all the leaders please take a step forward? And what happened was that everyone took a step back and left me standing there. So I do not wear the mantle of leadership easily. However, having said that, what I'd like to do is share with you this afternoon, very briefly, a variety of leadership programs that I've experienced, leadership experiences, and then also why that journey has led me to now be a leadership advocate. So, a little bit about my own training. At a very young age, I was 30 when I was invited to serve in the first leadership program, which was ethnic specific. So the National Hispana Leadership Institute gathered 20 Latinas from throughout the United States and had us go through 4 weeks of training throughout the country. The Kellogg National Fellowship Program was a 3-year fellowship program. It basically was the academic lottery. $100,000 was invested in each one of us to go out and become a better leader. No strings attached. You did not have to write a report. You just went and did leadership activities. So I got to live in China for a month, in South Africa for a month. I went trekking in Nepal, all under the guise of becoming a better national leader. The International Women's Forum was gender specific. So we brought women together and took us all over the world and said, let's help you become a better leader. So what we see here so far is ethnic specific, multi-gender, or including both males and females, but Kellogg wanted us to travel the world, so we did. IWF, it was gender specific, and then Women in Power is another gender specific program. At Harvard University, I participated in their inaugural launch at the Kennedy School of Government, and again, it was asking us as women, think about your role in policy making, in changing the world in terms of policy, and then go forth and do good. So what I would say these programs had in common was that I learned about leading across cultural differences. Yes, I also learned leadership skills, but it was about creating leadership experiences in order to then actually operationalize what it was that I was learning. So then we go on, and I arrive in Japan 10 months ago. So I'm still going through this cultural integration, but I was very struck when I first got here. I don't know if you remember the news 1 year ago, but Malala was on the news, CNN, every 20 minutes, because she was, being touted everywhere. She was at the UN. I love this quote of hers. She says, we cannot succeed when half of us are held back. So I love that Tony did the demographic overview of women in Japan, women in higher ed, because I got to Soka University and I asked, where are the women, right? I was the first female dean and the first non-Japanese at my university. And as part of my cultural integration, I was meeting English-speaking faculty members, English-speaking staff, and students. And they all had the same question. Help us learn about leadership. What is this? There's changing roles in our lives. We get conflicting messages. We're going to give you a degree, but then you're going to get married and stay at home. Right? So they were checking into this with me. And so because of that, I then began to formulate some questions. So what type of leadership is needed to advance globalization in higher education? I think that's what gathered us here today at this conference. But more specifically, I was asking, what is the emerging role of women? Because if we take Malala's words to heart, we can't do it with just half of us. in leadership positions. We have to be integrating the expertise and the experiences of men and women, even in Japan. United States has certainly had more experience, which is my experience, but we're not doing it right there either. So these questions were the ones that were beginning to move me forward. And so I thought about it. After 60 days in Japan, I wondered, well, what can I do to contribute to this discussion of leadership? If higher education is going to improve its access, improve its quality, as Bill asked us to think about, the leadership in our institutions will have to look different. Because we absolutely need both halves of the population, not just the men, but the women as well. And so this quote particularly moved me, and I think it really began to shape how I decided to move forward with these leadership questions. And it reads, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless seas. And that was my philosophical approach, if you will, to then answering the question, what can I do at my university to promote leadership development? And I thought, well, maybe the first thing is to begin to ask the women and the men at my university to imagine the vast and endless sea, to have a vision for what might be possible, to ask the question, what if women were proactively engaged in governance? What if female students were not only educated but asked to imagine careers? What if our female staff weren't short-ordered for 4 or 5 years and then asked to leave and or on their own voluntarily? What if we embraced them and decided to develop them in this human resource capacity so that they could continue to contribute to our institution? So, given that, I went to the university president and I said, President Baba, I'd like to launch a couple of leadership initiatives, and the first one is a leadership salon. And he said, what is that? And I said, well, it's when you bring people together and you get them to talk, and it's going to be about leadership. And he gave me the green light. He said, go forth. I said, okay. So then we launched in November. We invite female faculty, English speaking because of my limitations with the Japanese language. We meet about once a month. It's open attendance. So I know female faculty members are very busy, and you have full lives. And so I said, come if you can come, and if you can't, that's okay. Come the next time. Right, so it's an open attendance, open invitation, and in anticipation of that leadership salon, where we sit for 90 minutes and do salon kinds of things, we read a leadership article in advance. So the Harvard Business Review for me has been a great generator of articles, or The Economist. I mean, I look for leadership articles anywhere and everywhere. And my goal is to be able to provide a catalyst for the discussion. The article opens the discussion, but then for 90 minutes, it's pretty much free reign. Whatever it is that the female faculty members are bringing to the dialogue. So our goals were to create a space, a safe space for that conversation, to develop a network of peers. Our percentage of female faculty members, of course, similar to other universities, is small, but what I discovered was that women did not know each other even on campus. Female faculty members knew of a name, but they had never met that female professor in person. Or I mean, there was a lot of islands on campus. And so creating a salon created a space for that network to begin to develop. And it also created a trusting environment where we were able to now talk about what does it mean to be a female leader at our university. So that was the leadership salon, because Meg Wheatley was one of those international leaders who really promotes the idea that leadership can occur anywhere. Some people believe leaders have to be born, have to be made. I mean, there's lots of varying views. But she says, I believe that the capacity that any organization needs is for leadership to appear anywhere it is needed, when it is needed. So we kept moving forward. Once we had started the leadership salon, simultaneously I said, female staff, what could we do for the women on our campus who were staff members? And for them, I realized that the development of leadership skills was perhaps more opportune in terms of their career development. And so the leadership salon was open to female staff who spoke English. It really focused on the development of those leadership skills. We just finished our first seminar. It lasted for 5 months, 5 sessions, 90 minutes a month. They too had an article to read, but it was very different. It was specific to leadership skills, and it was experiential. So if you were members of my leadership seminar, you would be standing up and doing exercises, interactive exercises, exploring and operationalizing these leadership skills. And so what we looked at was the themes were strength of self, of voice, body, vision, and life balance. Those were the leadership skills that they wanted to continue to move forward. I've now promised them a full day intensive seminar sometime in July, maybe, because they didn't want to stop. I said, we're done. This is the last session. We're done. It's 5 months. This is what we committed to. And they said, oh, but we could do more. So now you've heard a little bit about the leadership salon for female faculty, the leadership seminar for female staff. And so this particular quote comes to mind. Leadership is about the decisions you make and the actions that you take each day. The world is waiting. Leadership is a choice, and it starts with you. And that to me was probably the biggest message and the most impactful message for female staff members at Soka University. That they could and were leaders, and that they had leadership decisions to make every single day, probably every single hour. But they never coined the term leader for themselves. The leader was the president or the dean or the director, but it wasn't them. And so changing that mindset was really, really huge in terms of our work. And I believe that true leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. When I was challenged, because while I'm sharing the results now, initially, leadership development for female staff, that wasn't seen very positively. That was like, oh, but Maria, I was given lots of reasons for why I should not do this. You're too busy. There's not enough English speakers. We already do development for our staff. I mean, I got a whole list. And every time I'd say, no, I want to do this. No, I think I can find them. But we don't have a room. No, I can find it, right? Because my sense was that even if they leave in 12 months, every young woman that is working at a university deserves to not only view themselves as a leader, but to be given the opportunity to develop and to claim that for themselves. It's about creating a space so that new leadership can emerge. So then the third leadership initiative that I would share with you is the leadership lectures. So I had connected to faculty, I had connected to staff, but I had students coming into my office, graduate students, undergraduate, that weren't in my faculty, but knew that I spoke English, knew I was newly arrived, and were very curious. Who's Maria? What? And always coming with questions. And so I began to make myself available for one-time lectures. We have a Soka Women's College, 700 students. Half of those students came to a lecture. And again, it was about how do I get them to think about leadership and develop their own roadmaps. So moving forward, The Economist, an article that just came out in their March issue, was very thought-provoking. Because The Economist is, I would say, a pretty familiar and popular journal, magazine. And this article, this was the title of their article, Japanese Women in Work, Holding Back Half the Nation. So I saw this article and I thought, this is the article for the next salon. And I have to tell you that the participants in our salon, this is female faculty, are very, very diverse. We have probably 30% are Japanese women who speak English. The other 70% are international faculty members on campus. So we have someone from Russia, we have someone from the Philippines, we have someone from Canada. So they're from all over the world. And what brings us together is that we're all teaching and we're all working there on campus. So this particular article made these points, and it really provided for a fascinating, if you can imagine, 90 minutes using this article and these points to launch discussion. So this first point, the challenges of combining work and family. The article shared this as one of the first points that's holding back half the nation. But what was amazing was that every single woman at the leadership salon that followed this, the reading of this article, all had personal experiences and challenges at the university that they could relate to. Cultural gender expectations, right? We looked at some of the demographics. Women get educated. If they get educated, they get married, they stop working, and then there's this dip in employment, and then once the children are off to school, they might return to the labor force. But what if a young woman doesn't want to stop working? What if a young woman has her bachelor's degree, is working, say, as a staff member, but wants to keep working even after she gets married and has a baby, right? And so the expectations, that's not a familiar expectation here. But young women, especially those that have gone abroad, that have had different worldview experiences, now their cultural expectations are clashing with the expectations that they were raised with. I love the concept of the bamboo ceiling. In the US, we call it the glass ceiling. But what was interesting is that the bamboo ceiling is opaque. You can't even see, at least with the glass ceiling, you can look up and say, I want that, but I can't because there's, right? But the point in this article was that it's not even glass, it's bamboo. You can't see through it, it's not transparent. So women often get educated in Japan, but then don't have options. They don't see a future. They don't, or aren't able to entertain what might be possible. So there's lots of mixed messages, and the whole concept of feminism, is it a friend or a foe? That's really my comment here in Japan, because it's challenging. It's challenging. So, last slide. Warren Bennis is a very popular leadership development guru in the US, and he says, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. So we have a vision of where we're going. You know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So the first job is to know where you're going. And I believe at least my hope is that at Soka University, that we can create a vision for the women, for female faculty, for staff, and for students. That if we can create that vision, collectively, we can turn that into a reality. You might ask, or I hope you would be asking, well, what about the men? When the Leadership Salon was launched, the message was sent out to all of the faculty. But then it was clear that this was an invitation to women and not men. And I probably had a dozen new colleagues come to me and say, well, why can't I come? When are you going to do something for men? When are you going to combine it? Yeah, it's been really interesting, and my pat answer is, let me get through this pilot. That's what I called it, a pilot. Let me get through the pilot session, the first one, and then we'll see. Well, I'm not sure that there's an end to the pilot, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. But I haven't told the male faculty colleagues that yet. But really, how do we translate vision into reality? So if we want access and quality in higher ed, if we want women's roles to continue to evolve, if we are going to incorporate innovations, whether it's technology or curriculum design, we have to think about the leadership potential that is present in each one of our universities. And women cannot do this by themselves. I would not have been able to launch this if the university administration or leadership had not endorsed it. It just would not have happened. And their commitment to wanting to, they weren't sure where the road was going, but their commitment to opening the door so that we could pursue that path was extremely important in order for us to be able to launch this. So, women in leadership, thank you.